Hello, Zer0 Books readers. You may have noticed that we've started running video live streams of our Herding Cats reading group on Marx's Capital, Volume 1. The participants in the group have primarily been some dirty rotten commies in Alabama, but I've also started inviting Patreon supporters to join in the chat as well. And starting this month, I'll be releasing videos that perhaps quixotically summarize sections or chapters from Capital. These videos are in no way meant to be adequate substitutes for the text itself, but rather the hope is that by releasing these videos, I can entice people to get a hold of Marx's big book and entice them to start reading along. This week we read Capital, Volume 1, Chapter 1, Section 4, on the fetishism of the commodity and its secret. Quote, "A commodity appears at first sight an extremely obvious, trivial thing, but its analysis brings out that it is a very strange thing, abounding in metaphysical subtleties and theological niceties." A recent comment left on our video report from the Left Forum objected strongly to the idea that there is such a thing as abstract labor that produces value. Quote, "In this idiotic video, the term abstract universal labor time was used. That term is meaningless, completely devoid of meaning for anybody who is working class. Physical labor is far from abstract, nor is labor uniformly universal, nor is the time put into it abstract. The idea that everybody is willing to sacrifice time doing hard work without a reward that increases their social standing is a fantasy that only somebody who only knows of hard labor from a book or from a short stint working during college can dream up. Try using heavy tools for 40 to 50 hours a week for a year, and then rethink your silly, idiotic cult." As harsh as this comment is, it points to some common pitfalls in Marx's theory, pitfalls that we can avoid if we take our time reading and thinking about Section 4 of the first chapter of Capital. The difficulty arises because Marx separates what he calls use values from value based on abstract labor. This is difficult for people to understand as it flies in the face of what appears to be the case, namely that the reason a given commodity has a certain value is because of its usefulness. However, Marx argues in the first three sections of Chapter 1 that labor time is a source of value. The third thing, that it allows otherwise disparate commodities to exchange as equivalents. In this section, Section 4, he explains why it is that the fact that labor time is a source of value is difficult to spot, why it is that we produce this value, often without really knowing it. Quote, "As a general rule, articles of utility become commodities only because they are products of the labor of private individuals or groups of individuals who carry on their work independently of each other. The sum total of the labor of all these private individuals forms the aggregate labor of society. Since the producers do not come into social contact with each other until they exchange their products, the specific social character of each producer's labor does not show itself except in the act of exchange. In other words, the labor of the individual asserts itself as a part of the labor of society, only by means of the relations which the act of exchange establishes directly between the products, and indirectly, through them, between the producers." End quote. Marx is often misread as either positing a mystical substance called value, or suggesting that the value of a commodity is merely ideological, or only a social construct that relies on our beliefs. But Marx claims the opposite. Even though the fetish nature of the commodity, the way the commodity mystifies workers and capitalists alike, can't be immediately found in the world of sensuous appearance, it is still a product of concrete, physiological, objective production. Marx says that the commodity reflects the social characteristics of men's labor. The commodity takes on a mystical quality because the commodity is a form that people mediate their social relationships through under capitalism. Marx uses human sight as an analogy. He says that when we encounter an object in the world, we encounter it precisely as an object. Let's say we spot a Rubik's Cube or a chicken. When we see these things, we perceive them as out there beyond us, and we don't immediately take into account how these objects are mediated by the lenses in our eyes, our optic nerves, our cerebral cortex, and so on and so on. The social relations between producers are likewise mediated, not only by the workers' eyes and brains, but also by the practices and relationships that are always in the background. People go to work, they create widgets, and those widgets are set in relation to other commodities as equivalents. The commodity appears as an obvious fact, a directly and immediately understood object. When we find a bottle of Coke on the shelf at the supermarket, we don't see the bottling plant and the workers who operate the machines. We don't see the workers on sugar plantations or cola nut farms. Instead, we see the bottle and understand it as having an economic value as well as a use value. We understand that it is worth, say, roughly $1.50, but we don't see how this price emerges. Even though it is immediately obvious that the value of the commodity is real, the social relations that create this social value are obscured. Karl Marx is not Bishop George Berkeley. That is, he is not an immaterialist, but a materialist. He does not take the world as being merely made up of perceptions or appearances, but believes that when we spot a chicken, she is both really out there beyond us as an object in the world and mediated by our optic nerves and brain. In the same way, the worker or capitalist who argues that the commodities they produce have an objective value and that this value isn't some mere spook or mental construct are completely in agreement with Marx. Just as someone who might insist that there really are white chickens congregated around a red wheelbarrow would not be in disagreement with an optometrist or brain surgeon who might be inclined to explain why he sees those chickens as he does, without denying that much depends on the red wheelbarrow and the chickens both. Let's return to the comment left on our video for the left forum. It should be easy to see now that positing abstract labor as a social reality does not require us to ignore or minimize the significance of the real and useful work that a man or woman on an assembly line does in order to make sure that commodities continue to spill forth at a regular and profitable rate. Instead of diminishing the reality of useful work, what Marx and his categories explain is why and how this work is so important, not only to the individuals who consume Coca-Cola or widgets or iPods, but for the whole of society. Marx explains how it is that what seemed like private useful labor is taken up by society as the foundation of all our economic relations.